It's rare that one would move to another country purely because of how it looked in a film. But our guest did just that, and it only took the perfect job opportunity to tempt him to return to the UK. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week, we're inspired to live life one cocktail at a time by everyone in this industry. Yes, Jack Sotti, senior Tanqueray and world-class ambassador at Diageo, fell in love with New Zealand after seeing the Lord of the Rings movies. He bought a one-way ticket to Auckland, and the rest is history. After wangling his first bar job there, his career took off and continued to rise, winning Australia's Bartender of the Year at the Diageo Reserve World Class Australian Finals in 2015. You'll have to hear how he won that and what he did after in today's episode. Before we begin, you can find links on how to donate to some of your favorite bars or have cocktails delivered right to your door on the homepage of my website, alushlifemanual.com. Now, on to Jack.
I was born where I live today, so I've kind of come home, which is in Enfield in North London. A very kind of, standard London living, like suburban London living. In North London, there's a big Greek community, so surrounded by lots of family. Went to school here. Went off to, I always say I got shipped off to boarding school, but that makes it sound like I didn't enjoy it. I absolutely loved it. So I went to a school called Haileybury in Hertford Heath, which is a really beautiful school. It's hundreds of years old and feels very posh, and it certainly was. But that was a really lovely education, and it's like having a sleepover with your mates every single night of the week, which was fun. And then I went to university in Leeds, where I started my hospitality career.
Wait, hold on. Let's go back to your family.
Yeah.
So they were Greek, and was this a typical Greek family? Lots of food and yelling and screaming and fun.
Yeah, it was always like a battle between my mum and my dad in terms of what the family will be like. So my mum is very typically British, and so she grew up in like a very kind of classic English upbringing, which is very different to Greek. And then obviously my dad is Greek, and so growing up I lived with my grandmother as well, my yaya. And so it was always this wonderful balance of, my mother's British sensibilities, and then, the crazy Greek side of the family as well. So it was actually a really nice balance. My dad is not the best Greek in terms of the true, my big fat Greek wedding stereotype. But he does, for me, he kind of encompasses all the right things that you really need if you're going to be a proud Greek, which is a love of food, cooking over charcoal, which she did every weekend, no matter what the weather was like, and hospitality, and just being that over forbearing, loving, no matter what you do, you just get doted upon, and I think I've definitely picked that up. I'm very, what does my wife call me? I can't remember what she says. It'll come back to me. But I'm very, very kind of all up in people's faces when it comes to smothering. I'm very smothering, and with my kids, my kid and second one on the way, and my wife, I'm all up in their face. And I think the same thing applies to my approach in hospitality. Just being thorough and making sure that you've covered every base as part of a guest journey. But I guess that's the conversation we'll kind of get onto.
Yeah. Now, you said that you started your hospitality career when you went off to university. How did you know that would be the career for you? Or was it just something you thought you would try?
Yeah, I mean, I felt at school I was bright, being reinforced by my mummy telling me how clever I was. So I always wanted to do something and contribute to society. It was really interesting, actually. I wanted to go into psychology, and I didn't get the appropriate grades to go to university to do the degree I wanted, which was in psychology. And so in the UK, we have clearing day, which is if you didn't get the grades, you get the dregs list at the back of the paper of what courses are left. And you literally in the course of 24 hours apply to whatever you think you can get into. And my mum was a wedding planner. She's been a wedding planner for the last 25 years. So I just thought, events, and my auntie does events as well. So I thought, let's do an events degree, because all I wanted to do was fly the nest and go to university. I'd already been at boarding school, so I kind of definitely didn't want to be based back home.
Did you ever think of taking the year out and, trying again?
Yeah, but I just wanted to crack on, and I really didn't want to. I wanted to travel eventually, but I just didn't want to have a gap year and wait. I just wanted to get busy and make money. So yeah, I went to Leeds and got into this events management degree, which I actually really enjoyed. It was a bit of a laugh, but also there was a lot of business and modules on entrepreneurialism, and I actually got a lot more out of it than I anticipated. But pretty much as soon as I landed in Leeds, I got a job in my first week, because that's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to work and experience life. And I had already worked a little bit throughout my teenage years for my father, who had a menswear suit shop. So I'd kind of done some retail stuff. And then as soon as I got to Leeds, I thought, right, I just loved, the partying lifestyle, and I was really good with people. So I kind of fell into running a club night, a student night. And it seemed like a really good business model for me, because I really wasn't down for an hourly rate, but I would get 50p for every name I got on a guest list for a club night. So it involved just me being social.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really great. I was the guy at the front door of nightclubs wearing, a long trench coat in winter, smoking a cigarette and having a clipboard, and I felt like the man about town. I was only 19.
But didn't you think I've just got to invite every single person I know? They all have to come, or I'm going to make no money.
Yeah, everyone. I got my own business cards made up. I treated it like my own business.
I love you.
And every single person I met, I just said, if you want to get into any club, just let me know. And I definitely wasn't that guy. I didn't have connections at any club, but as soon as someone said they wanted to go somewhere, I would just make it happen.
What was your title on your business cards?
Oh God, what was it? I can't even remember. I should dig one up. I can't even remember. It was really, really fun. And then I got fired by my boss, because I was being maybe a bit too entrepreneurial. I kind of saw an opportunity. I thought, why am I putting in all the hard work when there's the first year students? So this was in my second year, who want to work. And I said, listen, guys, you send me names to go on the guest list, and you can get 25p for every person you get in. So
God, you were subcontracting.
It was great, right? It makes sense. And for me, it was a win-win for my boss at the time, because he was getting more people in. I'm sure he was taking £4.50 of everyone who got in the club anyway. So I got let go because I was a little bit too entrepreneurial, shall we say, and I was gonna just continue doing it on my own. But I think it was literally 3 days later, after getting the sack, but one of the bar owners of one of the places I was kind of standing on the door said, where were you this weekend? I said, I got the sack. Well, why don't you come down into the bar and work behind the bar? I said, I haven't got an absolute clue. And he said, and I was quite young and healthy looking, and the bar was a gay bar. And he said, listen, mate, no one cares about what your drinks taste like. You've got a beautiful smile and you make people happy. So come and get behind the bar. And I said, oh God, okay, let's give it a go. And immediately I just fell in love with it, because, it was just such a different lifestyle. Instead of being stuck out on the front door, freezing your ass off, you were behind the bar. It was busy and sweaty, and you built this camaraderie up with the bartenders, and none of you knew what you were doing, but there was one kind of old dog behind the bar who would teach us how to make strawberry daiquiris and stuff like that. and just immediately it clicked. And I knew at the age of how old was I then? 20 years old, that I wanted to make it a career. And so I finished my degree because I would have been killed by my parents. And I finished well, and it was good, and I learned a lot. But whilst I was in Leeds, I then finished up in the kind of late night bar nightclub scene, and wanted to kind of seek, I guess, like a more specific, I guess, a more tailored training approach. So I went to work for Gaucho Group. So I'm not sure, they've undergone a bit of an upheaval at the moment, and they've gone a whole new remodel and restructure, and they're still killing it. But back in the day, the Gaucho were known for their training programs. They had an academy every single month where they sent bartenders back to school. Before you even set foot in service, you had to do a week's intensive course in a classroom every single day. And then they had continuous training and monitoring and assessments. And that was just the environment I really wanted to be in, because I just wanted to know how to do things properly.
Was it still in Leeds, or did you come back to London?
No, it was still in Leeds. So I helped open the new venue there. And then I worked for Gaucho for the next 4 years until I finished my degree. And then, and that was a year after as well. And I'd gone back down to London to work in down there.
What kind of things were you making there? Was it obviously a bit more refined than strawberry daiquiris? I mean, was it all the classics? Kind of thing?
The best thing about it was my first foray into food and decent food. Gaucho have got some amazing produce. They ship in their steak from Argentina, and they have got incredible chefs to work with them. And then they had this, the director of bars at the time, a guy by the name of Lance Perkins, who now, he just finished up as, I think, maybe the director of bars for the Edition hotels and the Punch Room. And so I haven't actually spoken to him since I've been back in the country. So it's been over a decade. But, I always used to look up to him because he was this, it's the first time I saw a bartender as a career in real life. This guy was, in his 30s, and he'd been doing it for so long, and he just dripped knowledge out of every pore. You just couldn't teach it without experience. And I just loved it. And I just wanted to be him in terms of, what he's done with his career. And so that was really good for me. And the drinks, very South American inspired, lots and lots of kind of fresh ingredients. The Bloody Mary was one of the best selling drinks. It was a really great starting point for a bartender, and I really couldn't recommend it enough.
Did you get to work with the chefs or the cooks as well? Were you learning that kind of thing while you were learning the drinks? Flavor and combining flavors.
Yeah, so you start off in that environment. You're not allowed to work on the bar unless you know everything about the food, just because they want you to be able to pull out a menu and explain every single element of a dish to a guest as a bartender. And so cross-training wise, that was really, really strong. And then I just found myself gravitating towards the kitchen all the time. And I had a really good relationship with every chef I worked with in every restaurant, mainly because I worked out a very simple rule I've taken with me my whole career, is that, keep the chef happy, and they'll share their knowledge with you, but more importantly, they'll feed you all of the great little offcuts of steak. So I would, if there was ever a downtime in the bar, I would walk into the kitchen and just start washing dishes if there was like a little pile up and the kitchen porter wasn't around. And, I wasn't asked to do it. But after a little while, the chef, really starts to think, oh, this guy's really got a lot of initiative. Nice of him to help. And then suddenly you can strike up a conversation whilst you're both working. And just say, chef, what's that you're doing there? And you just pick things up. And I think, that's the one bit of advice I give to young bartenders. Chefs can often be seen as these quite scary people. because they can be quite introverted compared to front of house extroverted people. And I've definitely met a lot of chefs that intimidate me, but it turns out they're really easy to get to know. They just want to see you graft, because that's the kind of person they are.
And I guess show an interest in what they're doing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, Gaucho, were you getting what you wanted out of this? I mean, I know you continued in your career doing it, but were you thinking, yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
I picked the right thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I constantly got loads of positive reinforcement. When I was leaving university and moving down to London, there was a small little battle between a few. They have, I think, 7 sites in London, and they were all arguing over which one was going to get me, which was really great and reinforcing. And I think I ended up at Gaucho Broadgate, which is a beautiful site in like a big glass box. And that was really cool. And that's when I met Galin Kirev, who now is the bar manager of Bagatelle. And he's an amazing guy. And that was the first time I've met someone who even explained to me what molecular gastronomy was. I just hadn't had a clue. I was just really into classic cocktails and the history. And suddenly, he showed me the El Bulli cookbook and brought in an ISI cream whipper into work. And I was like, what the hell is that? And then suddenly, all within the space of 6 months, I think, I got super into that. And I just, my eyes just kind of went outwards, out of London, thinking this is such a competitive industry. And there's so much world to see. I didn't want to take a gap year because I didn't want to waste time traveling, but suddenly I can travel and work with this skill that I've now acquired. So I think I was only back in London for maybe like 8-9 months, and I just thought, let's go somewhere. And I don't know why, but I decided to go as far away as humanly possible, which was New Zealand. Literally the opposite end of the planet from London. Probably because it was massive.
I was going to say that must have killed your Greek family.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you're going as far as you could. It's not like it's Italy or.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's a dad, and he missed me, but also, he definitely wanted to encourage me to do what I wanted. It was my mum who really struggled. And, I was gone 8 years, and, every week she would call me saying, when are you coming home?
Uh-huh.
But yeah.
Now what? Well, why did you pick New Zealand, do you think?
I was a massive nerd, and I love Lord of the Rings.
There's nothing nerdy about that.
Yeah. And I'd read the book when I was 11, and it was, for some reason, I always struggled with reading, mainly because I probably hadn't discovered fantasy. And I picked up Lord of the Rings and thought, holy hell, this looks like a really intimidating book, as it is. It was the trilogy before the movies came out. And I just read it cover to cover, and I just really shocked myself. And because I was so scared of books, but I consumed it, I reread it again. And I think I read it about 5 times in a row. And then I finally realized I could read other things. And I discovered a whole world of the fantasy genre. And then the movies came out. I watched them probably about 20 times and thought, wow, I think one thing Peter Jackson did so well was just embody everything on those pages. And New Zealand was the best place. And I had, all the extended cuts and behind the scenes. And I was just looking at this place called New Zealand. And I thought, shit, I've got to go. I have to go. And so it was really simple as that. And I really had no idea what the bar scene was like. Didn't do any research, but just thought.
Did you just pick Auckland or Wellington? Where did you go?
I picked Auckland because that's where you can fly into from London. I mean, you can fly into Christchurch, but I think I asked one person who had been there, Auckland or Christchurch. I didn't even know Wellington was a place, and they said Auckland. And I think within about 7 days, I'd spent my savings on a ticket, a one-way ticket, which is funny because of your last podcast. I got a visa approved. It was really easy. yeah, and I went there, and it was crazy. My mum was in bits, really upset, but really excited for me. And when I got on the plane, I sat next to this lovely Kiwi lady for the whole duration of the second leg. So I can't remember, maybe like 12 hours or something. And she was really lovely. And she hadn't been home to New Zealand for about 20 years. So she was just singing its praises, how much I was going to love it. And she said, "Oh, you're going to find a nice Kiwi girl and you're going to settle down. You're never going to go back to England." And I said, "Oh, yeah, right." I'm thinking I was going to go there and, sow my oats and be a young man and have fun in bars. And how right she was. But that's
but we're talking to you and you're in London, or you're in England, so we're okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
So did you know anyone going there, or any bars? Had you done any research?
No. After I bought my ticket, I Googled top bars in Auckland, and I really had no one to corroborate if they were good or not. And I think on the number one bar on the list was Sweet Bar, which Chanel LeCorey used to work at. I'm not sure if you know her. And Tim Etherington Judge from Healthy Hospo used to work at. James Goggin.
Yeah.
Barney Toy, some really cool people that, were on this pedestal. So I thought, let's go to Sweet Bar. So I turned up my first night. I went to the hostel, had a shower, put on a suit, and already had some CVs printed out with the telephone number blank. So I got a SIM card, wrote that in. And literally in the first night, I just had nothing else to do. I didn't know anyone. And I just went to Sweet Bar and I sat there and they said, "Sorry, no jobs. Here's a drink." They were lovely. But also, in hindsight, now I've run bars, it must have been so hilarious and naive, this backpacker just turning up and hoping for the best.
Like going into the Connaught and sitting there and going, can I have a job, please?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was I was out on my own, and then I just walked into, I thought, I haven't got time to me messing around applying for jobs. So I just walked into a bar that was, I think, number 4 on the list, and it was called 1885, and it was a really busy 3-story nightclub. But they had they had about 5 different bars within it, and I thought, God, they must go through staff. I can get a job here. So I walked in and I said, "Hey, is the manager on duty?" And so the manager came in and I said, "Hey," so I was already dressed in a black shirt, black pants, and black suit jacket. So Hospo Blacks. And I said, "Hey, I've got a trial shift here tonight." They said, "Oh, who?" So I didn't. Who organised it? And I said, "Oh, it was the guy on the day shift for me to come back." He was like, "James?" I was like, yeah, James.
Oh my God.
Said, "Okay, cool. Pop your stuff downstairs and jump behind the bar." And they got rammed, and I got a job that night. And I was friends with the boss later on down the line. I said, that no one gave me a trial shift, right? I just kind of turned up, which was cool. And within 6 months, I was the assistant venue manager there. And
obviously, James didn't tell on you.
Yeah, definitely not. To be fair, they went through so many staff. He probably had no idea whether he saw me or not. And it was really cool.
What was the difference that you found working there as opposed to working in London?
I mean, Kiwi and Aussie hospitality, I feel like I can lump them together, is quite unique in just the style. Even though a lot of the venues are, built by backpackers, and quite international bar teams, they're still adopting that kind of laid back culture of Australia and New Zealanders. The style is very informal, but still hits all the points. So you can have a fine experience. By fine, I mean excellent, covering every kind of cycle of service and making sure the guest has a wonderful experience. But you still kind of start it by saying "G'day, mate," and being really relaxed and shaking everyone's hand, and knowing people by first name, and it's just really, really chilled out. And I think that's where I really, really kind of thought, this is my style. This is how I want to be in this world, because I'd worked, in these fancy restaurants, and they were really nice, but also really proper. In London, all these business lunches, and you've got to be careful what you say. Whereas you just have such a laugh, and it was a really wonderful experience.
Did you find that you were like refining your craft while you were in 1885?
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of a bit of both. Upstairs in the bar, that was high volume, and that was fun, and that taught me a really valuable skill that I hadn't honed, which was like how to pump out drinks as fast as possible. But luckily there was a basement bar downstairs called the Basement, and it was a members bar. And it was still the Auckland crowd who were young and fun. So it wasn't a stuffy members bar. It was for, young money, lots of daddy's money, and, young advertising execs with no dependents. And so that's where we had cocktails. And I worked underneath a guy called Alan Raythorne, who now owns a bar in Melbourne. And I learned a lot from him. He kind of pushed me into competing into competitions. And we had no cocktail menu down there. So everything was done very much in like a milk and honey style of like, a la minute, find out what the kind of guest wants. And so we just had a back bar full of loads of different modifiers and loads of fresh fruit everywhere. And we just had to come up with stuff on the fly, which was really, really fun way of developing my palate, especially with all the kiwi produce, because it's so tasty.
And you said that he introduced you to competitions. Did you know that competitions were going on? Had you wanted to be in one? Had you wanted to compete?
Yeah, I was aware of them. I was vaguely aware of them. We had done some internal competitions at Gaucho, which were fun, but I'd never dared kind of put myself out there and stood up on a public stage. And, so, he just said, you're good at this. Why don't you enter this competition? I said, okay. And I think the first one was Appleton Estate. And the trip was, the winner won a trip to Jamaica. And I came last, but I was in the final, so the last out of 8. But in that final, I was working with I was competing against some incredible people who I hugely respect nowadays. You've got Tom Egerton, who's over in Singapore. I think he's in Singapore. No, he's in Hong Kong now. He works for Proof & Co. James Goggin, I competed against him, which is hilarious, as now we're both here. And Jason Clark, who works with me at Diageo now as a Talisker ambassador.
And who I know very well and has been on the show a while ago.
Yeah, so he won the competition. He was a very well-seasoned competition bartender when I entered my first one. And he did a great rum drink with like a cooked banana cream that was so delicious and just filled the room.
So what was it, something that you thought, oh yeah, I really like this, even though I came in last out of 8, I really love this, I'm going to try again?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you do it, you get the buzz and you get the thrill of adrenaline. It's something I hadn't felt since I was at school, and I was in a high school band. And I can't play any instruments, and I'm not musical, but I really wanted to do it. So I just said I can be the front man, and I would do songs by bands that don't require much of a singing voice, like the Arctic Monkeys and stuff.
Oh my God, I love it.
It was so good. We were called, what were we called? I can't remember the name of the band. The Cardiacs, I think. But then we realized that was a real band, and we had to change our name. Anyway, so I love performing, and I think I finally realized I could combine that and drinks. And immediately afterwards, I entered 42 Below Cocktail World Cup, because that was like, the best competition in the world at the time. This was Diageo World Class was only in its first or second year. It wasn't a global phenomenon yet. And 42 Below Cocktail World Cup was the one to win, right? And they had the country,
especially in New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, because it's from New Zealand.
So I made it to the final of that as well, which I was really proud of. And I was told I would have won. I mean, by winning, there's 3 winners because you create a team. But I was disqualified because I may have. I was doing a snap infusion in an ISI canister with some cacao nibs into some vodka or something, kind of had a menu on stage. And then as I was releasing the pressure, I may have inhaled some of the gas as a joke because of my years of working in nightclubs, which is, it's just laughing gas. It's completely fine, but also not a good look for a brand, and as a young cocky bartender, I admit that now. But it was pretty funny. It certainly made me notorious in New Zealand in the bartending community. So it kind of helped me in my career, taught me what not to do, and told me not to be such an idiot as well when representing a brand.
Now, I know you made the jump to Australia.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to leave your dear old New Zealand for that?
That was
leave the hobbits.
Yeah, Alan, my mentor at the time. We were two peas in a pod, and he was very much like, put his arm over me and be like, "Look, kid, we're both really good at this, but like New Zealand's small time. Let's go take on the big smoke over in Melbourne, because it's like the cocktail capital of the Southern Hemisphere." I'm sure people in Buenos Aires would argue with that, but it's one of them. It's very great, the cocktail scene over there.
On that side of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we decided to go as a team. Both he and I went over there. We had some friends already just through the industry, and we both said, right, we're going to go and work in either the Black Pearl or Eau de Vie, Melbourne. And we were just so cocky, and we said, these are the bars we're going to work in. And we got there, and the Black Pearl definitely wasn't hiring because they had the best staff retention of any bar in history. And Eau de Vie only had space for one, and it was Alan's friend who kind of hooked us up. So Alan got in there, and I waited diligently whilst doing some part-time shifts elsewhere for something to happen. And I just was really keen, how I've kind of done my whole career, I've kind of forced my way in. So I learned their entire specs back to front. I just told Alan just shared all that information with me. And one night, it was like a crazy thing happened where one of the waiters.
Wait. Let me guess. You said you had a guest shift. I mean, you right? Or you were supposed to do a trial shift. Sorry, a trial shift, because James had said, right?
No, the bar was waiting to get away with that. And the owner Greg worked at the bar. So no, one of the waiters had a punch up with the head chef. I'm not sure what happened. Very juicy gossip. But he stormed out, and it was a really busy service. I think the chef had left as well, so someone jumped in to make charcuterie and cheese plates. So there were two staff members down, and I was sitting at the bar waiting for my moment. And I was just like, guys, if you need a hand, I can jump on the floor. And so I did that and served all night. Eau de Vie Melbourne for me was like the epitome of cool. I used to watch their cocktail videos as a bartender in London. That was when YouTube cocktail videos were really big, long before Facebook and Instagram were on the go. And I was just obsessed with these videos. They're so cool. All the bartenders were like dressed up to the nines, and they had liquid nitrogen martinis. And the opening team of the original Eau de Vie in Sydney were infamous. So had to work there, and got the shift, got a job that night, which was great. And that's where I met Greg Sanderson, the owner of Eau de Vie and now the Speakeasy Group. And that was kind of my career sorted in Melbourne from then on in. I was there for 5 or 6 years.
And again, learning more, I'm sure. But how did you feel about that time there? What do you think you got out of it the most while you were there?
So during my time with the Speakeasy Group, I kind of went from, waiter to partner, and I was part owner for their second venue, Boilermaker House. So, they trusted me with Eau de Vie, which was the busiest cocktail bar I've ever been to. And, when I say cocktails, I mean like only cocktails. We sold 95% of our sales were cocktails. Sven, the other owner, he famously take out beers if they were selling too well, and take out wines if they were selling too well, because he wanted it to be predominantly cocktails. And it got to that cult status where, on the pass there'd be, 30 drinks, all with it was a very kind of like nightjar style, with all the little kind of fussy garnishes, cloches with smoke under, and it was the most cumbersome thing to put on a tray and take over to a table, and all the tables were really low, so you had to squat down. I just fell in love with it. So I learned how to deal under huge amounts of pressure, different levels of pressure because of the money people were spending on the drinks, the quality of the finished product. Like, we had someone working the pass like a chef would. Mm-hmm. I'd never had that before, and by the end of it, I was working the pass. I wasn't fast enough to work behind the pass on dispense. I used to get a lot of mickey taken out of me by my colleagues for not being on dispense. I could do the quiet nights, but they put me on either on the floor, on the pass, or on vacation station, which is the bar where you chat, the station where you chat up everyone who's sitting at the bar. So I was like the entertainment, which was great. And that bar team, like, I still fantasize about it today. It was me, Todd Finley, who recently just worked at Scout, Orlando Mazzo, who was a world-class bartender of the year a couple of years ago, and a whole heap of other legends. So it just hummed, and we used to have competitions for how many. Because we always had a queue that was about 100 meters long on the weekends. So how much money we made was down to how fast we could make drinks and how quickly we could turn tables. So in the end, I was the general manager, so I would never work on the bar, and I would ultimately just run the door. And we used to have competitions between me and one other guy who could get more bums on seats. And it must have been awful for the customers, because we were cramming people in there, splitting up tables and putting 3 different groups on one table. But in the end, it created this like buzzing atmosphere. You had like speakeasy swing music going, liquid nitrogen martinis, and bartenders shouting at the floor staff. It was the coolest environment I've ever worked in, and I don't think something I've ever seen replicated before. So yeah, it was bloody cool.
Were you competing as well during that time?
Yeah. When I got to Melbourne, I really got into things, and the first major competition I did well in was bowls around the world. So that was quite cool. I remember being inspired by Jason Clark, who also he represented New Zealand the year before me, and then because it was always Australasia, as a region. So the year after, I managed to get in winning Australasia, which was massive for me, and that was my first kind of international trip as a prize. Went over to the Netherlands and competed in the global final there, and I didn't win. Kate Gerwin won, and she did an amazing job, but it was still just such a great experience. And of course, I got a free trip home, because if I was
going to say, I hope you saw your mom and dad then.
Yeah. My dad and my brother actually flew over to the Netherlands to watch me compete, and that was when my dad kind of realized, this is a career, and he's not just pissing about over in Australia having fun, which is a really lovely, lovely thing for me, because my dad is a really great businessman, and has always wanted me to work in the family business, which is property. And, I just didn't, it just wasn't for me. And so, it was really cool of him to come over and support me that way. And I think, from then on, he kind of backed off and let me get on with it. And as soon as I had that trip under my belt, I was so hungry to do it again. And so I entered all the big ones, Bacardi Legacy, World Class, and I always did okay. But it was 2 years, 2013 was Bowls, and in 2015 I gave World Class another crack. And it was only my second time around, and I won it in Australia, and I really couldn't believe that was possible.
What do you think the difference between your first time trying and your second time winning was?
Mistakes. The first time I tried, I actually didn't even get to the presentation stage, which was the bit I was good at. It taught me a really valuable lesson. I just didn't follow the marking criteria. It's so simple, right? You see a brief, and you get all excited and you come up with a drink and you send in your recipe and you think, this is amazing, I'm going to smash this. But of course, on the second page of the brief is the bit you don't read, which is the tiny little terms and conditions they're writing. Why would you bother reading that? It's a creative process. You're just getting a drink in. And I just made a really simple mistake. I think I put like the wrong amount of liquid, like a spirit, into the drink. And so therefore it was determined invalid. And I didn't make it through. And it was just such an easy, dumb mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It was something I had to make, because after that, I became so hyper aware of the terms and conditions. And I think that gave me an edge, because I would look through everything, highlight them all, and then pull out specific things that they're looking for that weren't in the brief. You could actually see, depending on how many bullet points, the weighting of marking. You can see, okay, well, they've put 12 bullet points for flavor, and so you just divide the flavor part of the scoring by 12, and you can, as long as you hit every point. And so, I think just being hyper analytical of competitions was the way to go. I think I already had a knack for presenting, so I wasn't worried about that. But I think it's funny though, because the advice I give to bartenders now is so different, because I look at the drinks that bartenders are submitting for World Class, and it's only 5 years later, and I already feel out of my depth. It's amazing how rapidly the industry is moving. And, as soon as I won World Class, I traveled around the world as part of my prize, which was around the world in 80 bars, which was incredible. But then after that, I just opened up Boilermaker House as part owner and dived into spreadsheets and service, and had zero time for cocktails. And actually, after winning World Class Australia and then competing globally, I entered again 3 years on the trot, and I didn't do as good.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no regrets about that, because a lot of bartenders think, okay, I've won a competition. I don't want to kind of jeopardize my reputation by not doing it next time around. But I disagree. I think, you don't see Brazil kind of saying, I'm not going to compete in the World Cup every time, just because we don't want to always be the best. So I think it's great for creativity, just to keep pushing yourself. And cocktail competitions for me are just a way to get a highly specific brief and to start, clicking your brain into different ways of working and kind of pushing the creative process when you don't have menus to write, or, and most bartenders don't get the privilege of writing their menus, because that's up to, someone in management.
Now, did you want to own your own bar? Was that something that you had hoped? When you came back, did you think, I want to own one?
Yeah, it was a massive ambition of mine, because it is of every bartender's when you start falling in love with it, the magic of having complete control. And owning and operating Boilermaker House was so fun, and it scared me a lot. I mean, I was a minority partner, but it was enough to keep me interested. And it was so much work, and we made it work, and it was highly profitable. And I love the culture of building a team and a family. But I tell you what, it is hard work. It is so exhausting. And, my hair was thinning, and I definitely aged 20 years in the 5 years I was at Boilermaker. And ultimately, the only reason why I left, I was ready to stay in the Speakeasy Group and keep opening venues with my two business partners, because I love them and I love the Speakeasy Group and what they stood for. But ultimately, I wanted to have babies and a family, and we literally had a list of pros and cons for doing it in Australia and continuing with the career path that I was on, or doing it back in London where both of our families were and all that support was. And it was nearly in favour of Melbourne, but it was just maybe 1 point tipped over to London. And by this point, it had been 3 years since I won World Class, and Diageo had been knocking on the door for 3 years to come and work for them. And I said, no. I want to be a bar owner. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then as soon as there is a bun in the oven, you start thinking, well, it's quite tough. The hours are unsociable. The money is tough. There's no benefits. There's little security. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to take Diageo up on their offer. And it was an amazing job I came into. In Diageo, you've got the brand ambassadors, and they didn't really have a brand ambassador manager role available because Dan Dove had filled it for so long. And it's just like the perfect storm of Dan starting up his own consultancy and me having a relationship with him. And so it was coming in that extra level up at Diageo that kind of gave me, thought, well, I'm going to be a people manager. And that's something I really, really enjoy. I've got a deep, deep passion for it since operating my own bar and building a team and a culture. And so it's not just going to be, doing gin trainings every single day. And then on top of that, there was the whole carrot of running the World Class program in Great Britain. So I felt like I was coming home a completely different person to the boy who left. And so, yeah, it was an easy decision to make. And I had no idea how long I'd be at Diageo for. At the time, I thought, I'm gonna give it 2 years, which was really naive of me 2 years ago. Because in my mind, I still desperately wanted to own another bar, even though it was hard. I thought, I'm gonna have a baby. I'll get that sweet corporate security for the start, and then I've got some money from when I left Boilermaker. I opened a bar in London. And the longer I've been working in the Diageo, I'm not going to lie, I started off, it was really intimidating because it was my first foray into corporate life. And even though I was enjoying it, it was really hard for me to adjust. And so the whole time I was thinking, I'm still on the lookout for bars and business partners. And I was talking to a lot of people. And those conversations have ceased completely because 2 years in, I finally found my feet and I'm really, really enjoying it. And suddenly, I've got a team that I've hired, the majority of them. And the World Class program is growing and it's really mine. And I've changed it and put my experience from the competition into the GB program. And I feel like I'm like a really significant part of it instead of this outsider who's pretending to be corporate. I'm finally in. I feel like I've adapted.
But there's one thing that you haven't said that I know you do, and that is your relationship with Tanqueray. When did that start?
So that was from the beginning, and it was a really intimidating job role. So they were hiring a senior Tanqueray brand ambassador. So that's a Diageo way of putting it, putting the fact that you're doing 3 jobs in one, which... when I started, I think someone said to me, "Oh, you're the sucker who accepted that job role," which I thought was a compliment. And you know what? I thought, it was challenging. I was running World Class. I was a people manager of a team of 10, and I was a full-time Tanqueray ambassador. And it was really, really hard. But I guess I was trying to do all 3 jobs as 3 independent people would do them. And I just hadn't had the experience. Sorry, Diageo people, if you're listening. At the time, I just hadn't had the experience of juggling all those 3 things. And I think in hindsight now, I've hit my stride. It doesn't require juggling. You just need to merge the roles in such a way that they all complement one another. And just before all this business happened with COVID-19, we'd actually just agreed as a business to hire a Tanqueray ambassador and for me to step down that part because since I've started, we've had 4 new brand ambassadors start. And so I'm going to focus a lot more on people management and running the World Class program.
But now you said that one of the reasons to come back to London was, you're having a baby and you wanted the job security, but which is is exactly what a corporate job would give you. But the being a brand ambassador is like being on an airplane every 2 minutes, flying everywhere. Did you also have to do that part of it as well?
Yeah, so it wasn't there were global roles, but it was a UK based role. So
Oh,
there was a lot of travel, but 80% of it was in London. So no matter what happened, I could make it home to my wife and son every night. There were definitely ambitions of the global ambassador. Wow, what a job! But definitely not for a family man. I don't know how anyone could do it. Really, really challenging. Trying to maintain a decent family unit, and hats off to a lot of guys and girls who have done it. But it's definitely way too much for me, I think.
now you have, obviously you're dealing with people all the time. So that part of being a bartender is taken care of. Do you miss, or do you get to use your hands and make drinks and cocktails and still entertain people that way?
Yeah, massively miss it. And yeah, when I started at Diageo, I was going through an adjustment phase, and I said, you know what? Despite kind of doing this 3 roles merge into one, I'm going to keep bartending. And at the time, Ali Burgess and Jesus, who was running Happiness Forgets at the time, said, listen, it's always good to have casual help. And so I was doing 1 shift a week there, just because I was so stubborn to let it go. Despite my growing responsibilities with my family and the pressures of a new job, I thought, no, I have to do this. It's going to keep me sane. And I was justifying it as my social time, which was wonderful. The fact that I was able to say I've worked in a top 50 bar, a top 10 bar, was amazing. And I used to look up to Happiness Forgets when I was a young man. So it was really cool to work there. But yeah, it was. I was dreaming, and I think I lasted about 7 months of 1 shift a week, and the pressures of my real job got upon me, and so that didn't last. But I still get to do a lot of fun stuff in with this job. There's a lot of strategy, and so there's a lot of R&D and coming up with serve strategies and food pairing for events and whatnot. And so I guess that's part of the Tanqueray role. Doing loads of fun events, and that's really down to me and the brand team, what that looks like. But actually, that is the one scary thing about kind of moving away from Tanqueray is the, not being able to do that as much. But I've, since this lockdown period, I've been doing way more drinks at home on my Instagram, and that's been really fun. So I think that's something I can maintain, and that my Instagram could be my creative outlet, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, usually I ask, like, so what do you see for the future? Obviously, it's a weird time. So that kind of question, there's no way, because we have no idea what's going to happen, which is a little exciting. So because then I'll have to come back and interview you in a year, and who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I think the future is really exciting, and despite all the doom and gloom and the massive, loss of life we've seen globally, there's always a silver lining. And there's a lot of people talking about the environment, which I'm a massive eco freak, and I'd love to see, hopefully, a green rebuilding process. But the one thing for me is that bartenders are all entrepreneurs. They have this extroverted personality, and in a massive period of recession, there's always huge opportunities that come out of it. People adapting the ways of working, seeing gaps in the market and coming up with new business models. And so I'm really excited by what's happening with the industry at the moment. I think suddenly everyone's doing off license and off trade, and everything's going online. And suddenly, for the first time as a business model, bars have now got multiple revenue streams other than just people through the door, which I think is going to be really, really great for the business, for the whole industry. And I think even though it's awful and it's tragic, and hopefully as many venues stay open as possible, the ones that do survive will be stronger for it. It's kind of like a metamorphosis of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't wait to see you in our Roaring 20s, because I think that's what it's going to be. A complete, 100 years ago after the Spanish flu, Roaring 20s, we're going to have ours too.
That's a really, really lovely analogy.
Yeah. So we can actually,
fun.
I know, I think so. I think everyone will be like, let's go out. So we shall see each other at the bar in real life next time. Sounds good?
I know. I can't wait.
I can't wait too.
It was so great to hang out with Jack. We are fixing a date to drink as soon as we get out of lockdown. Before he departed, I asked him where he could be right now, if anywhere in the world, and also a few tips for the home bartender.
So, if you had the chance to drink anywhere right now, where would you drink and what would you drink?
There is a wonderful little bar in Meganisi, which is an island off of Lefkada, called Boom Boom Cocktail Lounge. And it's so cool. It's so cool. It's just all about music and blues and fun drinking. And it was a spot that I just had no idea I was going to stumble upon. So my dad and my sister my sister lives over there permanently. We went out on a little boat and we said, no, let's stop here for ice cream. And I walked in there and eating my ice cream. And I saw some cocktail shakers and swizzle sticks. And I haven't seen a swizzle stick in like a random Greek tavern forever. And I said to the lady, oh, what's this place? She said, oh, it's Boom Boom. My nephew, he does the cocktails here in the evening. And I hear they're really good. I don't drink cocktail. I don't drink. I said, okay, Dad, can we come back here later? So we came back and oh my God, it was so cool. So they do like just the most fun tiki drinks that are all really historically accurate from a recipe point of view and really professionally executed. And they've just got these lovely lounge seating right on the harbour front. So you just kind of lean over your chair and it's straight down into the water and there's boats all around you. So yeah, amazing blues music, tiki drinks. I'll probably have one of their Mai Tais, and a Greek evening in the harbour of Meganisi.
Hopefully, when this in about 3 weeks, when this is live, we can go there. Yeah. We can be allowed out and go to Greece. All right,
I'm planning on it.
Now, if you could give any tip to the home bartender, what would be your, top tip?
So I'm torn between two, but we'll go with the one I guess would be the top tip.
Okay, you can give me two.
Okay, all right. So the first one would be trust your palate, and it sounds really silly, but since I've been doing all of these Instagram live cocktail classes and whatnot, people, home amateur mixologists love recipes. And I'm always really kind of flippant, and I'm like, oh, this is the recipe, but if you want it a bit sweeter, just put a bit more sugar syrup in it. And so, well, which one is it? And so follow the recipe by all means, but trust your palate, taste your drink, and feel free to change it. Tweak the acidity, tweak the balance. There is no right specific recipe. It's all down to your personal preference. And I've learned that the hard way. I make a lot of drinks for my palate, and my mother-in-law, who keeps coming over to drink them, really doesn't like them because she's got a sweet tooth. And you'd do it in the bar, wouldn't you? The bartender asks you what you want, asks your preference, and a good bartender will always, without you knowing it, tweak it to your taste. And so you should do the same.
And what's your second one?
So that's the first one.
Yeah.
So the second one is ice. Ice is the most underrated ingredient in cocktails, and the cheapest thing for you to produce. If you want to make good cocktails and you're worrying about what to buy, I know on your blog you've got some amazing links to some really cool places to get all the right equipment and some really good products. But the one thing that's not going to cost them anything is to just care about the ice they're putting into their drinks. And so general rule of thumbs are more ice the better. Fit in as much ice into that drink as possible. Don't buy party ice because it's quite small cubes and it melts really quickly. Make sure you haven't got any stinky takeaways in your freezer or leftovers, because it will quickly scent the ice. Ice is really porous, so kind of have like fresh ice, don't have it sitting in there. But I guess the best advice would be, if you just want to do something really simple you haven't got to think about, buy deep, thick ice cube trays, and just have like, big blocks, because it's going to be the kind of highest quality. And then use filtered water in your ice instead of tap water, if you live in London, especially. If you live in Scotland, Scottish tap water is pretty lovely. But you just want to make sure you've got pure water, because it's going to make up a third of your drink ultimately. So it's very important.
Fabulous. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All this talk about ice, and we're making an ice-free cocktail. Now it's time to mix salty and sour in just the right way with our cocktail of the week. Olives and limes are not an obvious combination, but that's because you've never had our cocktail of the week, Jack's Nocerola Gimlet. Take 2 Nocerola olives, those are the large green Sicilian ones you can find in most supermarkets, and throw them into a shaker. Now muddle them. Then add 50 ml of Tanqueray Rangpur, 25 ml of fresh lime, and 25 ml of simple syrup. Add ice and shake hard to pulverize the olives. Then fine strain into a Nick and Nora glass. Garnish it with a Nocerola olive. Let me know what you thought of the olive-lime combo. Do you love it or hate it? Also, if you are confused by the UK use of milliliters and want to know how many ounces to use, you can find a downloadable cocktail measurement converter on my website, lushlifemanual.com, where you'll find this recipe, more gimlet recipes, plus all the cocktails of the week, as well as links to all the ingredients. Okay, what was my favorite thing to make this week? Imbam by Aldi. It's this delicious mess of eggplant, onions, garlic, tomatoes, and all in olive oil. After this, I know you'll be Googling the recipe, and yes, I'm still on the diet. If you live for Lush Life, make sure you're giving back to the bars you love by donating or taking part in cocktail delivery where you live. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Evo Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leaves me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde: all things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly and wash your hands and stay safe. Every July, I spend at least a week in Greece. But this time, with the dreaded C word in the air, I don't think we'll make it. So instead, I'm spending the next 2 weeks talking Greece and Greek spirits with 2 of the best in the business. First up is Johnny Lavanos of Ousia Restaurant in New York, and then Vasilis Karitsis of the Clumsies in Athens. Until that time, bottoms up.